How we doing, folks? Can you see me and hear me?
Yeah.
Yep. Happy days so far. um, I was just giving a bit of time for people to come in here. We're at 24. I think we should have close to double that number, but I don't know. Anyway, um, did you manage to get a view at that video I uploaded on design thinking? Some people did. Good. It's it actually is it's tangential to this program, but what I wanted to show you was something that was extremely practical and uses the concepts we're talking about of empathy and emotional intelligence. So I just need to get down to the rib. I won't start into singing. In a second, I just close down one or two bits and pieces here and less of the banter. So I was talking about the design thinking as an idea generator. It's also a problem solver, and it has no limit to its actual uses, provided that you understand the basic steps of it, the 5 or 6 steps inside in the process itself. And like every good piece of research, it relies heavily on how you adapt it and use it. And in this case, your understanding of empathy. And of course, how can you understand empathy if you don't know your own emotional intelligence and levels of empathy, for yourself as an individual, because that has so many bearings on not only on our professional lives, but indeed on our personal lives. And you know yourselves, and we talked about picking up signals and so on. And I did talk about the looking at things from different perspectives, and we used the 6 and the 9 by way of the example, and so on and so on. And so what I want to do is there are 2 more sequences to this area of emotional intelligence, and we're going to have a look at the first part tonight. Now, I will not be releasing this video until Friday. What's on Friday? Does anyone know? Well, we become a technological university for starters, so you'll all be graduating from a university. But more importantly, it's the 007 latest film coming out, so I'm competing against James Bond. Oh, Jesus, did I say that? Oh God, I agree. I enjoy my own jokes, but the reasoning for not releasing until Friday is not that I want to compete against Daniel Craig or any of the likes of. It's because I need to get the second group involved, and it's become a little bit disjointed because I found that I was mixing and matching, and some video one night might be better than the other in terms of uh, the content, or whatever. Very little differences, very subtle differences, but I decided that what I'll do is I'll wait until Thursday night and do as I did last Thursday night and stayed up until 20 to 2, splicing videos together and so on to get the best of the best and put them all together. So I'm going to do that from here on out, so it'll be Friday morning at some stage that I'll get the current week's lectures out to you. So that's essentially the program going forward as such. Anyway, I know I'm in with you on Saturday week, I think. So we get, as I say, up close and personal, but not too close, 2 meters close. How's that? It's more than enough. But in any case, we should be down in Athlone for one of these sessions. It takes a break from this total online stuff. Okay, I won't say anything. I'll keep it as is. Right, folks, let's get up and running and see what we have. And here we are. So again, tonight now, as I said, I'm going to go into the next part of emotional intelligence. It's a relatively shortish one, you'll be delighted to know, but then again, it depends on how much I talk. That we get through this material. And oh, hang on, that's the wrong button. So let's have a look here. Yep. And again, you know, what's your emotional quotient? Again, Time magazine going back historically or whatever it was, looking at this whole concept. But more importantly, as Aristotle said, anybody can be angry. That is easy. But to be angry with the right person, at the right degree, at the right time, and for the right purpose, and in the right way, that is not within everybody's power and is not easy. And you know, much and all as Artie would talk about it, it's there's so much truth and wisdom in those words, because you know yourself. If I take a very simple example, you could be getting angry with another adult. Now put yourself in the position of getting angry with a child, we say, for example, one of your own children, or a child as such. And notice the kind of levels that you could be talking about, and how you will most likely pare back the levels of anger when dealing with a child, for example. Some might argue the case that, well, really, you should be paring back with an adult as well. Trust me, there's some you just can't. But yeah, and you might say, well, that's, you know, inappropriate language. You can't do this. As I said, I have no time for the political correctness and all that. You've got to be able to speak your mind, but you have to be able to have it tempered at the right level, and what you can and can't say, from your own comforts, not so much the other person's comforts. You will be taking on board the feedback from the other person, but nevertheless, it will depend on the context in which there might be that, shall we say, raised levels of frustration, annoyance, anger, and so on, and for what reason. And you can't overly compensate for how somebody is reacting. You have to have it tempered and measured. And you can see, and that can happen dynamically. You might be giving out to someone and they might be giving back as much as you're giving out to them, or being angry with them over some incident. It's usually in the context of something that has happened, or something that's been missed, a deadline missed, or poor results, or bad report, or whatever. And you might have some levels of anger being projected to that person, and that person will be fighting the corner. And the more it evolves, then eventually that person might begin to break down. And let's take in the worst case scenario, break down into tears and so on. And then how quickly you'll pull back, and you will actually change your behavior and your style. So again, and that's what we were talking about when he says that it's not within everybody's power, and it's not easy, because you have to be constantly switched on. You have to be constantly in tune with the person, so that you know that you're keeping that level of momentum in presenting your point and your opinion, or your let's just say in a frustrated or angered type tone. Anger is probably the harsh word to be using for it, but nevertheless, being emphatic enough that you're bringing the person along, and you have to slow down and move up and slow down and up and down, such that they're eventually getting the message that you want to convey. Okay. So if we take it on here, and we've seen this before, and as I said to you, you have these 4 dimensions. You have the self-awareness, the self-management, and in many respects, what I was just talking about is the self-management, such that you know, and you're aware of what's happening. You know yourself, how far you're pushing a particular boundary, and then to be able to manage yourself to pull back or push it even further, depending on the case. And then the social awareness and management and relationship management, because at the end of the day, you certainly don't want to sour the relationship, the professional relationship you may have with your peers, or your project team, and so on and so forth. So you don't want to jeopardize that relationship and so on. And that's kind of going around this quadrant, I would say, in using that example of you know, how we might relate in a tempered situation or context. And it's not always, as I say, it's not always in the negative. again, just to come back again to Thomas Carlyle here, he talks about the greatest of faults is to be conscious of none. And again, this comes back to the reasoning why we do these psychometric metric tests, for you to get a measure of your self-awareness. And as I said, as part of the leadership traits, your cognitive ability and awareness of your environment and so on, these are absolutely critical, because you can only start with yourself before you can start to practice and invoke any of these learnings or experiences in future situations, work or otherwise. Ability to accurately perceive your own emotions, so understanding why you feel the way you do. Stay aware of your emotions as they happen. So we have so many different concepts on this when we're talking about, and I often use the expression, these are dynamic. In other words, they're changing as they're happening. It's like a service. You consume a service as you're buying the service. In this case, being aware of your own emotions as they're happening. So at the same time, it's almost like having a split personality, where your main body is focused on dealing with a situation or a group or a person and so on, and your other ego is looking in on you, interacting with that person, having that dual personality approach for all intents and purposes. But that's essentially what's happening to ourselves, because we can actually instantly feel how we are interacting with somebody else and putting ourselves in those shoes. Now, this might be sounding a little bit oversimplistic in by way of explaining this, but that's how it actually happens. This is what happens in empathy, and for me personally, that's how I know it works for me, because I'm actually putting myself in the other person. It's almost as if I'm taking the other person out of the equation, and I'm interacting with myself in many respects. And can you learn to do it? Of course you can learn to do it, but it takes a lot of practice, and then you're just swapping in and out of the other person, you and the other person, rapidly, so as you can see how you're interacting with that person as such. So, and how to keep on top of how you tend to respond to specific situations and people. And I can honestly say that even in these type of situations, I do find myself, for example, having to bite my lip in certain situations, because I can see some of the I have two words that I use interchangeably, and they're not very nice words. That are should we say, might describe cohorts, not student cohorts, but people that I may interact. And if I were to use the adverbs, it's dumbfuckery and fuckwittery. Be rather expletive about it, but you find yourself in those type of situations where you feel like tearing your hair out when you're trying to portray or explain or convince or converse with someone on a particular point of view, and particularly when you know that it's evident that the other person has neither the depth of knowledge nor the research or the data to back up the should we say, their points of view. And I alluded to this previously when I talked about a German philosopher, Van Getz, and he talked about, there's nothing worse than arguing with an ignorant man, and essentially ignorant of the subject matter. And that has become very, very entrenched in our in society today, quite simply through the fault of social media as such. So again, we find those levels of frustration. So how do you manage? And as I said, I do find myself at times having to bite my lip, when in particular types of situations, and I have to alter my behavior, because I certainly can't go out and call them those names. Well, actually, I have been known. Yes, I do it through facial expression. I will make certain gestures as if to say, are you for real? Are you even on the same planet? I mean, how did you tie your shoelaces this morning? Is that why you're wearing slip-on shoes? And so on. So I have to use those compensatory type mechanisms to calm down, Mark. Don't get overexcited. It's not worth it. But generally, it is. But these are the kind of things, these are the types of situations that we find ourselves immersed in, multiple times in a day, quite often. So again, knowing yourself, so improving your self-awareness. Now, there is a bit of a link here on that you can jump into YouTube and just double check and see if this is active. I'm not going to go in there. Yep, it is active. You can do that for yourselves, but you'll have to use the PowerPoint slides in slide format or in presentation mode to be able to click into this link, and it'll pop open for you just to have a look at this guy talking about some self-awareness as such. I quite haven't figured out, well, I do have a solution to be able to embed that into the YouTube, but that's just a step beyond. Coming back, know yourself. So see yourself for who you are, what you think and what you feel. Okay, so knowing yourself and being absolutely dropping the alter ego and just projecting the ego, the self. So watch your emotions like a hawk, even psychological signs. Kind of, as I said, applies against what I've been saying. Not really. You don't want to be overly expressive. Like I don't want to. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where somebody's talking to you and they're making some absurd point and you're going, huh? It's kind of obvious, but we can hold back that and have some kind of it could be a subtle flick of an eyebrow, ever so raised, that will be sufficient to send out a signal to that person, and watch for the reaction. It's remarkable to see how some people will actually blush if you are very careful of how you respond to some, I'll call it an idiotic statement, which is not founded in fact or anything like that, or somebody's chancing their arm with something. And if you measure and the more you practice it, you will find that the less effort you're putting into the visual response can provoke an even deeper response from that person. Are you all with me? Now, as I quickly look down and see a few cameras and see, can I get some reactions? Yeah, and people are giving me thumbs up, fair play. But you can follow what I'm saying. So track and backtrack your emotions in a difficult conversation or meeting. Learn your tendencies or in emotionally arousing situations. So how are you actually responding? And that's why I mentioned this, that one of my mentors, Terjo Nurmi, for his ability to have such an even emotional state, as we refer to in the earlier lecture. And this is what we're talking about here. So you can be in a situation, as I said, this is the beauty about the dynamics and of reflective practice and your abilities. Once you've evolved these skills even further, you'll actually be in a situation where you're discussing something and trying to portray a point or get a point across, and you'll find certain levels of frustration, and then eventually you'll get that point across. Immediately you'll be able to kick your brain into, well, how did I get that? So we have another point to get through, or maybe 4 or 5 more points to get through, and I'm getting the same type of resistance. How did I handle that previously? And you might find that, oh yeah, this is how I did it, and blah, 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 blah. So your mind is already working in multiple, I was going to say parallel universes, but in multiple parallel strands almost. So you're going back and you're thinking, how I solved that previous point. And you're already looking at, how can I do this more efficiently now that I'm in this situation with the second point or the third point and so on that we're trying to discuss and our problem to solve. How do we get it the first time? So you're already doing it in action. That's why I particularly like one of the approaches to reflection practice, which I'm describing now, is reflection in action. So we're doing it literally on the fly. And there are basically 2 approaches, reflection on action. This is where you'll take your time out and you think back on days, weeks, years, months ago and relate to problems. Right now, we're talking about inaction while you're trying to solve a problem and you're working and you're frustrating your way through some issues and you're flying through other issues. What's happening? Why are these issues that we're flying through? What are the dynamics? What's happening? How am I picking up the signals that makes this a more positive experience than 10 minutes ago or 2 hours ago, where it was less positive and more negative, and we were having to fight through issues and so on? How can we untangle those to keep the positive momentum going and the motivation and so on, so on, so on? So use paired sharing, peer or supervisor. A lot of people find this difficult, but essentially it's, finding a co-worker or a colleague that you can be absolutely open with and ask for feedback and talk to them and say, is my approach to this off the wall, or I believe I'm doing this correctly. What do you think? And literally just to get because remember, oftentimes we become so focused and so intense in what we're doing that we don't pick up on the signals, and we might be going off on a certain tangent and lose people. Okay? That's one of the difficulties here, for example, with this online and this particular subject matter. I'm trying to keep an eye on a handful of cameras that are open just to pick up on some expressions and so on. Whereas it would be, for me, it would be considerably different in person. But that's the nature of the environment. So we have to adapt. That's why every so often I would ask, if people are with me, following me, or gone off to make coffee and just signed in for the night, and say, I'll look at this rubbish later on video. Not that this stuff is rubbish by any stretch of the imagination. So own your own actions. So take full responsibility. So again, we'll make mistakes and we'll have failures and successes, but you have to take responsibility and accountability. Something that eludes many people at all levels in society. And it's catchphrases like the lessons we've learned from that, and we'll take the positives from this and all that sort of stuff. You'd love to believe when people are saying that to you, that they will genuinely learn from the lessons and that. And yet, and I'm alluding to particularly political scenarios and politicians and the way they interact, and when something goes horribly wrong, and say, we've learned lessons in this, and going forward we'll do this, and there's just a whole raft of thought that comes out, and expressions and so on. And I'm the kind of person that say, I'd love to come back in 6 weeks or 6 months or 2 years time and say, right, show me what you've learned from that. Show me what's in place and procedure and policy, how you've done this. What would you do differently again? But it never happens, because it's, as I refer to it, it's clickbait. It's happened there, and the actual follow-up and accountability, the real, what's the word I'm looking? It's not responsibility, accountability, but real ownership for something, and proving that what we've done and how we rectified it has actually been positive or negative. So it's again, it has to start with the individual. So taking responsibility and say, mea culpa, hands up, made a mistake here and this, but this is what I've learned from it. This is how I went about it. I wouldn't do it this way again, and this is how I would do it the next time around. And most certainly, you'll find that in the private sector. You can make substantial mistakes, provided you learn from it, and that's all part of the development, experiential development. Now, if we look at Plato, the first and best victory is to conquer yourself, or the self, or the ego. So the ability to use awareness of your emotions to stay flexible and positively direct your behavior. So managing your emotional reactions to all situations and people. And I mean, that this concept of the self-management, yourselves. If you walk into a room, and I use the expression, with a sour puss on you, what are you going to be met with? Claps and cheers, yay, well done. Probably not. You're going to meet with the signals you're sending out are going to be mirrored back to you. So generally speaking, if you're going in and you're giving off the negative signals, the negative vibes, even unintentionally, they will be rebounded back towards you. Point in case was some years ago. Oh, geez, I'm going back now quite a few years. One of the companies I worked with, we had issues. I think I was saying to you before, we needed to cut salaries and cut things and put a temporary freeze to try and keep things on even keel. And the last thing we wanted to do was have redundancies for all sorts of reasons. If you go over a percentage in the numbers, then you have to go public. If you go public, then your competitors get word of it, and then your clients get worried. Are you going to be able to deliver because you're now letting go of staff, and your suppliers are you in trouble, and so on and so forth. So that's the last thing you want to do. The next thing, and usually if you're talking about redundancies, you're talking about last in, first out, or options. Voluntary redundancy can be the worst situation because you could lose all your key staff or most experienced staff and so on. So we're faced with all those type of dilemmas. And I always remember spending that weekend, an August bank holiday weekend, trying to come up with some formulas that would where we would all be taking the same pain shared proportionately. And quite simply, it was to take a salary drop of around 8.99%. We agreed to round it off at 10%. So it was going to hit the higher earners more than the lower earners in the organization. And we needed to have 100% agreement. That's how these things work. If one person dissented, then it was back to plan B. We did have 2 dissenters, but an open door policy to discuss it with them. They changed their minds within a matter of hours, and we got the proposal through. What happened after that was a whole other story. How one of the senior managers made a total horse's ass of it because of his style of management, being country club manager. But I'll come to that much later stage, so I'll reuse the same experiential story or instance. Anyway, as part of our prior training under professional development and so on, and NLP and all that, we were having a series of meetings. The senior half dozen, not even that, 5 of us in the company at the time, were having quite intensive meetings as to what we could do, how we were going to do it, and so on. But we all knew that when we left that meeting, we had to walk down that corridor with our shoulders back, heads up, for example, and briskly, and still interact with people as if nothing was going on. Now you might say, but that's not being fair to people. You're disguising. There are times when you need to protect people. And in this instance, it was one of those times where we had to shoulder the responsibilities as senior managers until we had a solution or a couple of solutions that we could offer to people and explain the reasoning behind where we are. Everyone kind of sensed that the company was in a spot of bother, should we say. The whole industry was. And therefore, we had to come up with a solution. And until we had something, rather than there's nothing worse to say, well, what are we going to do now, Marco? I don't know. And run around, hell break loose. Even coming into work in the mornings, the way we came in and went to our respective offices and so on, because people watch. And they were watching for, is there any, if Marco's going in with his shoulders down or a long face on him, they would sense, and word gets around, people talk. So immediately there must be something up. Did you see the state of Mark walking in there this morning? Jeez, he wasn't in the best of form, he hardly saluted, he hardly did this, or blah, 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 blah. They pick up on all sorts of signals. So you have to manage the emotions that you're giving off. Emotional intelligence at this level and in these contexts. So emotional reactions to all situations and people. And maintaining that level, because people look for leadership, and that's one of the strengths of leadership, is how you're actually containing a situation or promoting a positive situation. So what are the triggers that make you want to blow an emotional gasket? Oh Jesus, what time are we until here tonight? 9:45. I could be here for a month of Sundays telling you about the emotional triggers. But you know yourselves, there are certain things that that click in the wrong direction. Someone might say something, and I don't mean insults now. They might just come out with something daft, or they might come out with something that's very positive. And an emotional gasket might also be that it lets off steam, and you say, "Yes, we're on the right page. Yes, let's go for it," and all that sort of stuff. High fiving yourself even. I don't believe I did that. Jesus. But going around doing that sort of, it's not all about the negative. It can also be the positive. But knowing what triggers those, is it the team's collective emotion, the emotional intelligence the meta intelligence, emotional intelligence that you're feeling from the group as a collective. Are they fired up and so on? So that can spur you on to do something else. Or is there a dejection? Is there dissent? Is there conflict and so on? And that can actually blow an emotional gasket, because you want to say, stop behaving like children. Might be your response. You need to get this done and get it done and so on and so forth. And oftentimes that might be the gasket blown, but when you produce a logical, practical solution, step by step, that alleviates people's concerns, fears, worries, and so on and so forth. So the pressure cooker comes back down to some normal operating levels as such. Again, there's a link inside here. You can have a look at those type of things. But it doesn't mean that you should be going off into the kitchen and throwing the Delf and cutlery around the place, just to let off steam. I mean, we do have our own mechanisms and so on. Your social awareness. Again, Buddha tells us, resolve to be tender with the young, compassionate with the aged, sympathetic with the striving, and tolerant with the weak and wrong. Sometime in your life, you will have been all of those. So again, it's an all-roundedness of character, because some of you might have actually heard the expression before. I might have even used it here in the past couple of weeks. Always be nice to those on the way up, because you'll never know when you'll need them on the way down. As you're going through the promotion steps inside an organization, don't do it on the backs of others. Don't, and essentially that's what it's alluding to. But you will have these various experiences in life. And really, this comes down to the level of respect and how you'd like to be treated. If you put yourselves in these type of vulnerable, whether positive or negative situations, how would you like to be treated, and how would you respond to the way you're being treated if you're in those type of situations? And this is what I'm saying. You need to get outside your own ego and put yourselves into the other person's situation. So in terms of social awareness, ability to accurately pick up on emotions of other people, a recurring theme, understand what is really going on. So sometimes you might have two people inside and work, and there's a bit of an issue and so on and so forth, giving rise to conflict and heated exchange and so on. It might not have anything to do with the workplace. It could be something going on in their personal lives. It could be something going on in their social circle that's distracting or causing a negative response to them. And the work scenario is the gasket which they're trying to blow off to dissipate this other experience. This other experience hasn't gone away. It could still exist there. It could be there for quite a period of time, or it could have just happened at the weekend, over bad football game, or over the Ryder Cup. So you could be carrying in luggage. It could be relationship, it could be health, and so on and so forth. So sometimes there are underlying issues, to use that other expression, much used these last 18 months. So understanding what other people are thinking and feeling, even if you don't feel the same way. That's where you're into this higher ordinate levels of empathy and emotional intelligence. You're feeling one thing, but you're able to switch out and feel the other person's feelings for all intents and purposes. That's why I keep referring to it as multi-threaded, multi-strand, multi-universe, call it what you will, plane of existence in that respect. So your mind, our minds can handle that most of the time. they can handle it, provided you give yourself free time to reflect and stand back to recharge your battery to be able to go into these multi-strands again. That's important. So again, social aware empathy is the ability to see the world from another person's perspective, feelings and emotives and so on. We talked about this previously on the 6 and the 9 and different perspectives. I know exactly how you feel. Why? Because they both have an arrow in their butt. But as I said to before, don't ever make the mistake, and I use this example of, going to, we'll take the worst case scenario, going to a funeral for someone whose parent has just passed away and both your parents are still alive, and you go to them and say, I'm sorry for your loss. I know exactly how you feel. Talk about blowing a gasket then. How could you? You haven't experienced it. You don't know. But your parents are alive. You can't empathize with that person. So those kind of platitudes, it will come back at you. You would say it with the best intention and so on to try and put yourself in that person's emotional state, but you can't because you haven't experienced it. So best off saying nothing at all. In those types of situations. So improving your social awareness. As just get my glasses here as we go down to them. So spend a little time observing, asking, and listening. So this is why we talked about the I mentioned earlier on, we have the peer supervisor kind of interaction. Find someone else to talk to. Maintain eye contact. Give the speaker your full attention. Okay, and that's I won't say it's not easy to do, but you have to be very careful how you make eye contact. Now, you'll have a lot of these professional coaches and mentors and the Terry Prones with their, what's she call it, clinic? Doesn't matter. Coaching people on public presentation and speaking and so on and so forth. And they would say, never look a person for too long straight in the eye. Now, I'm staring into a camera here, which is fine. So it doesn't react back to me. But it's oftentimes they say, maybe pick a dot on their forehead and look at that, but and fleetingly glance around the room, making occasional eye contact with people, but you daren't sit there and look at straight in the eyes permanently. You're trying to, how's that? Look into my eyes, not around me, into my eyes. What's your man out of Little Britain? Anyway, don't do that, basically, but maintaining eye contact and because people will pick up on, and they will pick up on the emotions. It's all the rest of the stuff that's going on around your face that they pick up on as well, and they can see the sincerity and interaction from your eyes. So give the speaker your full attention, play back and summarize. So, and that is a skill that does require developing. So when you're listening attentively, and I mean listening attentively to somebody, you're able to pick up the salient points and synopsize those and play them back to the person, reiterate them back, mirror them back, such that, and it's a two-way learning, because by that process, they're hearing what they're saying from your perspective, but you're also double checking that that's the message they were trying to send out in the first place. So it's over and back, a ping pong approach. So try on their shoes, which go clearly. Suspend your judgment. So not until you have collated the data, facts, context of a particular situation, whether it is in work or otherwise. In other words, put control on your biases until you can pragmatically and effectively assimilate all of the data and then come up to a conclusion or a decision. So don't rush things in. And the worst case scenario would, oh, I know what you're talking about, and this is what we do, blah 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 blah. Taking control of the other person's mind almost, and they're probably wondering, you haven't a clue what I'm talking about, or oh yeah, but yeah, he knows exactly what I'm talking about, but you're depriving them of the context in which they want to convey a particular message to you, and they'll withdraw within themselves because you become overly assertive in that type of situation. Of course, read body language. I alluded to facial expressions and so on, but the whole package. And then decipher emotions in speech tone. Again, listen to obviously the tone of speech. The higher the pitch tends to be a little bit more excitable, the lower the pitch more relaxed and reserved, but not necessarily always the case. It might be just a general demeanor of a person, how they actually speak, and the tone of their voice. And also, you will find that sometimes, in an extreme situation, people who would suffer from speech impediment like stammer or something like that, and the simplest reason for that is that their thought processes are faster than their speech conversion of their thought processes. And some of those people are actually fantastic singers. Have you ever heard of a singer stammering? It's I'm not going to even attempt to try what one might sound like, but no, they don't. It's because it's a different thought process. It's just a recital of words, so they know the words and they don't have to take in all the other dynamics and parameters and so on, dimensions and context into the simple words that they're putting to music. So to decipher the emotions. How are we doing time-wise? We're doing great. We are doing fabulously. So relationship management. And Lemony Snicker here says, people aren't either wicked or noble. They're like chef salads, with good things and bad things, chopped up and mixed together in a vinaigrette of confusion and conflict. Yeah. So this is in the context of relationships and interworking within groups. You're dealing with so many different personalities. Now, there are even formulae for working out effective relationships and the number of relationships you need to manage. For example, if you were in a production line, and let's just say that there were 40 people inserting the same components into printed circuit boards, literally manual, that's all they're doing all day long. Then that you could manage those 40 people because, generally speaking, because they're all doing the same types of tasks. So there's not going to be too much of a variation in the types of conversations and issues that might be arising. Now, if you had 40, we'll say, engineers, between software engineers, test engineers, system specialists, and so on, there isn't a hope in the world could you manage 40 relationships like that. So usually they say that the best ratio in a team is 1:8, between 8 and 12 people in a team. That's about the limits of our comfort zones in interacting, particularly when you have people with so many diverse backgrounds and qualifications and so on, generally speaking. I can't remember what the formula is, 1 + n to the power of something or other, because the formula is exponential the more people you have, and the diversity based on the diversity of their backgrounds and so on, and skills and competencies and so on. So the ability to use awareness of your emotions and emotions of others to manage interactions successfully. So ensure clear communication and effective handling of conflict. And that's essentially what it's saying. So how quickly if you're in a group of, supposing you're a project manager of 10, 12 people on your team. So knowing the people on your team, knowing they're getting a deeper understanding of their personalities, will help tremendously in when you have these collective type situations, and how you can get the best out of the, should we say, the lesser experienced or the shy person and so on and so forth, versus the very talkative, extroverted type person, and so on, how to get the balances right. And that's your job as a project manager or a project leader. It's not about being only the figurehead and being the boss and so on and so forth. It's how you get the team to function. And that's what this is basically talking about, the relationships themselves, ability and awareness of your emotions and the emotions of others. So now it's not just a one-on-one anymore, it's one to many and many to one. And this is where we're going to the next level of how in tune we can be to multiple stations and listen and make sense of it. So improving relationship management, how can we do this, generally speaking? Seek to build high quality, high trust relationships with people. So a few good friends are worth more than dozens or thousands of followers on Twitter, or colleagues as such. So, and as I say, your network is your net worth. And just because you have maybe 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 people on your LinkedIn profile that are connected to you, and so your connections, they're not well. It would be audacious for me to say they're not your friends, but the probability of them being individually friends with you are slim to none, and so on. But we can become a little bit delusioned by the fact that, look at the size of my network, or look at the number of followers I have on this. Have I more followers than I'm following? If you look at your whatever networks you're on, and so on, and people actually are gullible to that type of in existence. Oh, I got 20 followers, I got 20 hits, I got 6,000 hits, I got 1,500 followers and all that. When you see my YouTube videos come up and says subscribe and hit the bell for likes and all that, that's me pleasing, looking for friends. It's just part and parcel of the package. Don't worry about it. And I could say, yeah, everyone do it so as I can get to the first 1,000, and then I get more credits and things like that on my YouTube. No, that's actually what it is, but don't worry about it. But anyway, so try to discover what role emotions are playing in your interactions with others. So again, understanding, look for the responses. When I already tonight I came out with my two of my most favorite words in the English language. Now, had I been there with most of you in person, I would promise you the majority would probably giggle. A lot of people would relate to what I'm saying, and there would be a handful of people who would be their jaws would drop. Did he say that? Is he using bad language? I use all sorts of language as long as it's effective and it gets the point across. And that's fundamentally, and sometimes it's great to do these things just to provoke a reaction as well. That's the command of the English language means all English language and all words. Okay, yeah, but you can't. It's how you can, not what you can't. And try to discover, as I said, the role of emotion. So if you sense tension or other emotional reactions in a person's body language or speech, ask questions to seek to understand. And again, for myself, if I'm in front of a cohort of students, you have the obvious signs. Their heads are down or onto their phone. Are they bored? Or are they genuinely just looking at something, or are they checking something out and so on the mobile phones? Do I ban them from lectures? No, that's individual choice. I'm not going to demand and insist that people pay attention to me while I'm giving stuff. It's personal choice. But you will pick up on those people, and you will find that you can be drawn to those that are interested in what you're saying, and you have to avoid segregating out those people to the detriment of those that might be struggling or might be quizzical about something. So you have to be able to scan the room quickly and understand and know what's happening. And it's the same for any kind of public speaking or team interaction as such. That sense of looking for those reactions and how quickly you're picking them up, and how quickly you can slow things down or tone things down and ramp things up again. Because I know, for example, I know what this course is involved in, and I know that there's a certain level of trust that you have to place in me, and I have to respect that trust, that I bring you on this journey over the 8, 10, 12 weeks or whatever it is, to get you to the end, and at the same time give you something that you will find useful in some shape or form. So there has to be that level of trust at the speed at which I'll ramp up and up and up, and then start getting more into some of the they're not difficult. But there are some aspects of it that will be challenging. Okay, let's just put it that way. But not enough to want you to say, "Oh, geez, I'm sorry you took this course." No, it'll never get that serious. Be quick to settle disputes, differences, and opinions of misunderstanding. So absolutely, and that's again not only picking up on the emotions, but how quickly you assimilate the data, the facts, the issues, and surrounding that particular context of difference of opinion, and so on and so forth. And and separating out the facts from the emotions, such that you can manage both effectively. And sometimes we might have to give the emotions the backseat such that we can deal purely with the facts, to uncloud the facts because of the emotions that have been infused into the way that the data had been presented or is being presented, and so on. So sometimes you have to take out those emotions and just deal with the hard numbers, as I would say, or the facts, and then map the emotions back onto the next phase and the next phase, and so on. So you're separating, putting them in and out as such. So emotional intelligence, people with a high degree of emotional intelligence know what they are feeling, what their emotions mean, and how these emotions can affect other people. Now, not everyone can boast or have the confidence to be able to say, yes, I fit into that box, and so on and so on. We all do at certain times. And this isn't some higher state of evolution that we all have to achieve, and so on. So we're already there. It will depend on the situation and the context in which we're dealing with. When it comes to the professional level side of things, we're all coming from pretty much the same or similar playing fields. Some are more advanced than others, and you could put that down to experience, some levels of education, but generally speaking, life will prepare you for work, and work prepares you for life, to use that kind of unusual combination as such. So emotional intelligence is the ability to understand and manage your own emotions and those of others, which is a repetition of the previous comment in we're looking at. I'll have to admit, I don't quite understand the full significance of this. Well, that's a weird thing to say since I put this together, but it gives you an idea of what kind of the emotional intelligence and the levels of interactions that you might have. And if you take, for example, supervisor versus a manager, technically will have a slightly higher emotional intelligence than maybe the C-level suite, as they call it, the chief executive officer, because they're dealing more with people, and these are dealing more with environmental situations, how the company is performing as an entity. That's not to say they don't have emotional intelligence. Of course they do. They wouldn't be getting up there without some levels of it in the first instance. But their focus becomes slightly less humanistic and more towards data and foresight and so on, and analyzing other companies, and then trying to develop strategy, which is not quite at the human level as such, but they expect people to follow the strategy and contribute to developing the strategy. So that's really what these levels are, and executive levels down to director, and then manager, supervisor. The reason why I would probably offer for the supervisor having slightly less than the manager is that the manager would be seen as a more position power, more authority driven than or based than the actual supervisor, and so they don't have sufficient accountability and responsibility for individuals. So if a supervisor may give some feedback on your appraisal, but who's doing your appraisal? It'll be the manager. And therefore there is a perception that the emotional intelligence is less in the manager from the perspective of the employee as such. But it's actually often quite the reverse, because in a highly functional organization, this feedback from the supervisor into an employee's appraisal is the most valuable feedback for the manager to be able to make a judgment call or whatever in terms of professional development, and so on and so on. And we look here then, what is emotional intelligence? A set of emotional intelligence skills. Perceive and express ourselves, develop and maintain social relationships, use emotions to make proper choices and decisions, and then cope with challenges. So all of these, and take them in multiple situations that you would probably encounter in your daily work environment, and you're dipping in and out of those four basic collectives of descriptors of emotional intelligence. Just bear with me then. We're pretty much done there on that. And we're back. How am I doing time-wise? Yes. Any questions? Comments? I do have the volume up. I do, yeah. Any insults or jokes? No? Does that all make sense to you?
It's quite complex.
So he agrees with you as well.
I think it's quite complex, and like from my point of view, when you have like a manager that I certainly, my manager would be quite emotionally intelligent, but would use it as not in a good way.
Yeah. And there lies a problem. That comes under the general umbrella of toxic leadership.
Oh, absolutely.
And
A narcissistic approach.
oh yes, um, fortunately, I can speak of experience there as well. But absolutely, no, that's what it fundamentally comes down to. It's pure narcissism, and there's nothing worse in a toxic environment or with a toxic manager that's using the emotional intelligence as his toxic weapon.
It's a her.
It is indeed. Having looked at research on this and helped write on dissertations on these, there are interventions, and the final intervention, or the most effective intervention, is to quit and walk away. Easier said than done. I know. That's great, Mark, but we have mortgages, bills, we have life, we have this, we have that, and everything else, and so on and so forth. Only you can answer that question as to the value of, I'll use the expression, your own sanity and professional performance, as in the long term, is it worth it? We kind of live in this hope that eventually maybe they'll pass on. When I mean pass on, move on to another organization or a different department.
Yeah, I would wish that too, but it's not going to happen.
No, but there are other choices would be for you to move on, to other parts of the organization without having to sacrifice. But yeah, they are tricky situations, and again, can you manage them? Absolutely, but it takes real strength of character, and this is where it can really push your own emotional intelligence and personality to the limits. And worse again, you've got to try and get inside their minds in terms of empathy to understand what's driving it, why are they behaving like this, and then start to replicate it and feed it back. But I tell you, that's one hell of a strategy. Does it work? Absolutely. But you really don't want any distractions, because you have to be focused on how you manage those type of situations. Because remember, these people unknowingly are quite good at playing with emotional intelligence and exploiting. So they can see the tricks coming down the road because they know the tricks themselves. This is the point. Now the challenge is how to get one step ahead of them and create the environment that throws them off the scent or confuses the signals that they think they know about. I'm even confusing it even more. But do you follow me?
No, not at all. It makes sense.
Yeah.
And like everything that you're saying is actually quite true. And not only, like is it, just one person that it's done on a number of people. And unfortunately they don't see it. But I have. And I have to say I do have great strength of character, and
Mhm.
I've just don't put up with that shite, if you'll excuse the
No,
language.
no. I can genuinely say I understand and empathize very good. And here's another dimension to it. As you're saying there, Sheila, you will have in the, a strength of character, and you can see this going on, and you can see it going on to other people. And what can be really, how to say, exacerbating the situation is that you feel powerless to help the weaker persons in the group. You can see it happening to them, and you actually genuinely feel like going up and punching the person's lights out, for treating those, whatever about the way they're treating you. But that just goes to show that the levels of empathy and how we go to those levels, that we put ourselves last and put some other, I won't say strangers, but other persons. You'll prioritize their emotions because of this. Let's just say the toxic manager is exploiting someone. You feel like wanting to jump in and maybe protect that person, or have a go at the manager at your own cost almost. And that's what happens in these situations. And it does boil over until enough becomes enough. But again, you can manage these people out of the equation if you work as a collective. That's and that takes emotional strength. You'll all get your jobs done, you'll hit your targets, you do this, that, and the other thing, but this is a whole different playing field. And the sad part of it is that with the right leadership and the right circumstances, that team would probably perform far more effectively than it currently is. I have no doubt about that. Okay, okay. Anyone else? Any questions, comments, insults, jokes, even?
I have one about the assignment, Mark, whether that's allowed at this stage or not, I don't know.
Say again.
I have a question about the assignment, whether that's allowed at this point or not, I don't know.
We'll throw it out there anyway, and we see how we can help or otherwise.
I was looking at the first one, the one that's due now in 2 odd weeks or so, and it's the emotional intelligence and the MBTI, that sort of stuff. How do you want that presented? Do you want screenshots and stuff referenced underneath it, or is screenshots okay? It looks like there's a lot of stuff in it. There's just going through it every day.
Okay, the simplest way. Now, I always say that there's no such thing as a stupid question, only a stupid answer. And who gives the answers around here? Generally speaking, me. Anyway, but to no, a very valid question, absolutely, and I know other people would probably want to ask the same question. Most definitely take the screenshots of the results, okay, and just literally screenshot and copy and paste it into a Word document. Okay? So you'll have for each of the tests. What I'd say is, if you're doing a personality test, just take a screenshot of the result, the synopsis of the result, and then comment on it. And you can actually put on in as an appendix the actual more detailed results if you wish. Okay, and make sure you trap the website page that you're on in the first instance. So you're showing that there's a legitimacy to the results as well. Is that helping?
Oh, absolutely. No, I just didn't know whether you wanted a reference list of everything at the bottom of all the sites we use. It's not going to fall foul of or fund of the software that attaches plagiarism around.
Oh no, God no, jeez no. I know you will be doing that if you haven't already done so in terms of reports and plagiarism and academic quality and all that sort of stuff. Not into it. Not for this. I mean, life's too short. Just a screen snapshot of where you were, what the results were, and then just your own written text. It could only be a small little picture of the actual result. ENTJ or INSF and the percentages of introverted versus extroverted. That's short synopsis, and then short picture, a single picture, and then underneath that, your half page or so of self-analysis of that result, and then in the appendix, you might, if you wish, you can have the more detailed screenshots and a web page that you took the MBTI test from, and that's all. Don't go too hard on it. But definitely, I don't need to see. Not at this point. Only in the final report will we bring you up to the more formal academic referencing, and your bibliography or referencing in the correct manner and all that sort of stuff.
That takes a lot of the pressure off. So thank you.
Not at all. You're welcome. You're more than welcome. Anyone else? Any questions or? So, if you have no questions, then I will be letting you go, and you can sit anxiously for the 1st of October. Either James Bond or Emotional Intelligence, your choice, when the video gets released. Okay, folks, listen, have a good night, and we'll talk to you again next week, please, Scott. All right. Cheerio. Not all, you're welcome. Bye.
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 Thank you.